Hi guys, today we are going to find out what if Pearl Harbor never happened. You're standing on the bridge of the IJN Akagi, December 6th, 1941, watching Admiral Nagumo pace nervously. The intelligence officer bursts in with decoded American radio intercepts. They know you're coming. You feel the tension as Nagumo realizes the surprise is blown completely. The attack fleet, just hours from Hawaii, receives the abort signal. You watch 353 aircraft being secured instead of launched into history. Back in Pearl Harbor, you see American sailors going about Sunday morning routines. The battleships sit peacefully at their moorings, unaware of their near destruction. You probably won't survive realizing how one intercepted message changed everything forever. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now sit back and let's dive into today's alternate journey together. You witness Admiral Kimmel receiving confused reports about Japanese ships retreating northward. Intelligence analysts scramble to understand why the attack never materialized. The world holds its breath as December 7th passes without infamy. You find yourself in the Oval Office watching Roosevelt struggle with mounting pressure for intervention. Congress remains deeply divided, with isolationists citing the false alarm as proof of warmongering. Across the Atlantic, you witness Churchill's desperate cables pleading for immediate American support. The Lend-Lease program continues, but public opinion hardens against direct military involvement. You observe German U-boats growing bolder in the Atlantic, sinking merchant vessels with impunity. American factories hum with war production, yet the nation clings to neutrality. You watch families gather around radios, hearing reports of London's continued bombardment. The America First Committee gains momentum, arguing the Pacific threat was overblown. Meanwhile, you see British convoys suffering devastating losses without American naval escorts. Roosevelt's frustration mounts as he realizes America's delayed entry costs Allied lives daily. You witness the strange paradox of a nation preparing for war while avoiding it. Public rallies feature speakers demanding America stay out of Europe's problems, yet you notice military recruitment quietly increases as young men sense inevitable involvement. The winter of 1941–42 becomes America's longest period of anxious neutrality. You feel the growing tension as isolationist resolve weakens with each passing month. You stand in the Wolf's Lair, watching Hitler redirect his entire war machine eastward. Without American involvement looming, German generals receive unlimited resources for Operation Barbarossa. You observe panzer divisions that historically defended France now rolling toward Moscow. The Atlantic Wall remains a minor coastal defense instead of a massive fortification. You witness Rommel's Africa Corps receiving reinforcements that would have gone to Normandy. German U-boat production doubles as Hitler focuses on strangling Britain through blockade. You see Luftwaffe squadrons, freed from Western defense duties, supporting the Eastern offensive. The Wehrmacht advances deeper into Soviet territory than ever historically possible. You watch German engineers redirecting steel and concrete from Atlantic defenses to Eastern railways. Supply lines stretch further as Hitler gambles everything on crushing Stalin first. You observe German factories producing more tanks and fewer coastal guns. The siege of Leningrad intensifies with additional artillery freed from Western duties. You witness Hitler's confidence soaring as he believes victory over Russia guarantees global dominance. German commanders express private concerns about overextension, but resources seem unlimited. You feel the weight of history shifting as Germany commits to a single-front strategy. The Reich's industrial capacity focuses entirely on the Eastern campaign's demands. You find yourself in the Imperial Palace, watching Japanese war planners pivot their entire strategy. Without the crippling American naval response, Japan focuses on the Dutch East Indies oil. You observe Admiral Yamamoto arguing for a defensive Pacific strategy instead of offense. Japanese forces pour into Southeast Asia, overwhelming British and Dutch colonial defenses. You witness the fall of Singapore happening weeks earlier with additional Japanese divisions. The Burma campaign receives massive reinforcements, threatening India's eastern frontier. You see Japanese naval forces concentrating on protecting vital shipping lanes to captured territories. Australian fears intensify as Japanese expansion accelerates without American Pacific interference. You watch Japanese engineers rapidly fortifying captured islands into impregnable bases. The Zero fighter production increases dramatically without needing to replace Pearl Harbor losses. You observe Japanese merchant marine safely transporting crucial oil and rubber resources. Thai and Vichy French cooperation deepens as Japan appears unstoppably dominant. You witness Japanese diplomatic efforts securing neutrality agreements across Southeast Asia. The Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere expands faster than historically possible. You feel the momentum as Japan consolidates gains instead of pursuing risky expansion. Japanese admirals debate whether to eventually confront America or maintain defensive posture. You stand in the cabinet war rooms watching Churchill's desperation reach its peak. Without American naval support, German U-boats strangle Britain's Atlantic lifelines mercilessly. You observe food rationing becoming more severe as convoy losses mount catastrophically. The Royal Navy stretches thin, unable to escort merchant vessels across vast ocean distances. You witness British industrial production slowing as raw materials become increasingly scarce. Churchill's speeches grow more urgent, pleading with America to abandon its neutrality. You see Londoners facing their darkest winter as fuel shortages cripple civilian heating. Operation Sea Lion preparations intensify as Hitler senses Britain's growing vulnerability. You watch RAF pilots flying exhausted missions with dwindling fuel and ammunition supplies. British morale wavers as German propaganda broadcasts highlight America's continued absence. You observe Commonwealth forces stretched impossibly thin across multiple threatened fronts. The Mediterranean becomes a German lake as Italian and German forces coordinate effectively. You witness Gibraltar's garrison preparing for what seems like inevitable German assault. British intelligence intercepts suggest German invasion barges massing in French ports. You feel the suffocating pressure as Britain faces potential collapse without major allies. Churchill privately considers negotiating terms, though publicly maintaining defiant rhetoric. You find yourself in the Kremlin, watching Stalin face the Wehrmacht's undivided attention. German forces advance on both Moscow and Stalingrad simultaneously with unprecedented strength. You observe Soviet reserves depleted faster than historically possible without German Western distractions. The siege of Leningrad tightens as additional German artillery pounds the starving city. You witness panic spreading through Moscow as German panzers approach the capital's outskirts. Soviet industrial evacuation becomes chaotic as factories lack time for proper relocation. You see Stalin considering evacuating eastward as the military situation deteriorates rapidly. The Red Army's winter counteroffensive fails without adequate reserves or equipment. You observe German forces maintaining momentum through the brutal Russian winter. Soviet morale crumbles as German propaganda highlights America's continued neutrality. You watch Stalingrad's defenders running critically low on ammunition and supplies. The Trans-Siberian Railway becomes Stalin's last lifeline to relocated industries. You witness desperate Soviet appeals to America falling on deaf, isolationist ears. German forces encircle Moscow while simultaneously threatening the Caucasus oil fields. You feel the crushing weight as the Soviet Union teeters on complete collapse. Stalin privately prepares contingency plans for a government retreat beyond the Urals. You witness Roosevelt finally receiving the justification he desperately needs for war. German U-boats sink the USS Reuben James while escorting British convoys in November 1941. You observe American public opinion shifting as sailors' bodies wash ashore in Maine. The sinking of USS Kearney follows, with dramatic newsreel footage galvanizing American sentiment. You watch Roosevelt address Congress, declaring the Atlantic attacks acts of war. Isolationist resistance crumbles as families mourn American servicemen killed by German torpedoes. You see the America First Committee dissolving as public support evaporates overnight. Congress passes war declarations against Germany by overwhelming margins in December 1941. You observe American factories shifting into full wartime production without Pearl Harbor's urgency. The draft accelerates as young men enlist seeking revenge for the Atlantic casualties. You witness Roosevelt's relief as America finally enters the war through the back door. British morale soars as American destroyers join convoy escort duties immediately. You see German submarine commanders receiving orders to avoid further American provocations. The Lend-Lease program transforms overnight from aid to full military alliance. You watch American troops beginning deployment to Britain by early 1942. Hitler realizes his gamble has failed as America enters through Atlantic incidents. You find yourself in Tokyo Bay, watching the ultimate Pacific confrontation slowly building. Japanese expansion reaches its natural limits without triggering immediate American retaliation. You observe both navies conducting an elaborate dance of provocation and restraint. American oil embargoes tighten as Japanese forces consolidate their Southeast Asian conquests. You witness increasing incidents between American and Japanese patrols across the Pacific. The Flying Tigers engage Japanese aircraft over China with unofficial American support. You see diplomatic tensions escalating as neither side wants to fire first. Japanese admirals debate whether to strike the Philippines or maintain defensive posture. You observe American reinforcements streaming into Australia and the Philippines throughout 1942. The economic stranglehold forces Japan toward inevitable military confrontation despite preferences. You watch both sides building massive naval forces for the coming Pacific showdown. Intelligence networks work overtime as each side tries predicting the other's intentions. You witness the powder keg atmosphere as minor incidents threaten major escalation. Australian and Dutch colonial forces plead desperately for immediate American military intervention. You feel the mounting pressure as economic warfare gradually transforms into military positioning. Both Roosevelt and Emperor Hirohito privately hope to avoid direct confrontation while preparing. You witness the Pacific War erupting in March 1943 when Japanese forces attack the Philippines. American bases at Clark Field and Cavite suffered devastating surprise attacks without Pearl Harbor's lessons. You observe MacArthur's forces retreating to Bataan earlier than historically, caught completely unprepared. The Battle of the Java Sea becomes America's first major naval engagement, ending disastrously. You watch inexperienced American pilots facing battle-hardened Japanese veterans with predictable results. Wake Island falls within days, as garrison forces lack the reinforcements Pearl Harbor motivated. You see the Doolittle raid launched from Midway instead, targeting Japanese home islands. American industrial mobilization accelerates frantically, 18 months behind historical schedules. You witness the Battle of Midway occurring in late 1943 with different strategic circumstances. Japanese confidence peaks as early victories exceed their wildest Pearl Harbor expectations. You observe American morale struggling without the unifying rage Pearl Harbor provided. The Guadalcanal campaign begins in 1944, delayed by America's slower Pacific buildup. You watch both sides learning harsh lessons about Pacific warfare through costly experience. Australian forces bear greater combat burden as American reinforcements arrive more gradually. You witness the Pacific becoming a brutal learning laboratory for unprepared American forces. Strategic bombing of Japan commences later, allowing more industrial dispersal and preparation. You stand in 1945, surveying a world transformed by America's delayed Pacific entry. The atomic bombs drop on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in late 1945, ending a prolonged war. You observe Soviet forces occupying more of Eastern Europe during America's Pacific focus. Churchill's Britain survives but emerges far weaker, nearly bankrupt from extended isolation. You witness Stalin's expanded influence as the Red Army pushes deeper into Central Europe. The Holocaust continues longer without earlier Allied intervention, claiming additional victims. You see Japan's empire lasting 18 months longer, causing immense additional suffering. American casualties in the Pacific exceed historical totals due to unprepared initial campaigns. You observe the Cold War beginning earlier as Soviet-American tensions emerge during wartime. The United Nations forms with different power dynamics, reflecting altered wartime contributions. You witness decolonization accelerating as European powers emerge more weakened. China's civil war unfolds differently with prolonged Japanese occupation affecting both sides. You see technological development altered as wartime research priorities shifted significantly. Post-war reconstruction takes longer with delayed American economic dominance. You observe how 18 months changed the entire trajectory of the 20th century. The world map of 1950 looks fundamentally different from the one you know. You've journeyed through a timeline where one intercepted message changed everything forever. The absence of Pearl Harbor's galvanizing shock created ripple effects across decades. America's delayed entry allowed Axis powers to consolidate gains and extend suffering. Britain teetered on collapse while the Soviet Union faced potential annihilation. The Pacific War began not with surprise but with inevitable economic strangulation. Millions more died as conflicts prolonged and liberation came later. The post-war world emerged with different superpowers and altered global balance. Technology, decolonization, and reconstruction all followed dramatically different paths. You realize how single moments can reshape the entire course of human history. Sometimes the events that don't happen prove more consequential than those that do. History hangs on such delicate threads, where intercepted radio signals determine fates. The world you know exists because 353 Japanese aircraft found their targets. In this alternate timeline, December 7th passed quietly while catastrophe waited. So here's my question for you. Which single moment in your life, if changed, would completely alter who you are today?